The person we welcome in at this time every Friday is senior producer from NFL Films and also co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show, Greg Cosell, whose appearance on the show is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. Well, Greg, as you mentioned before we even jumped on the air, this has the potential to be a weather game. In your opinion, how much could that weather level the playing field for the Steelers in this matchup?
I would say meaningfully, Brownie, which I hate saying that because, quite frankly, and I hope my Steeler fan friends don't get upset with me, but I'd like to see the Bills win for reasons that aren't, solely because I'm with you guys. I just really like watching Josh Allen, and I enjoy studying their tape. So it's more professional reasons. But I think if it's truly snowing and it's windy, not that Josh can't throw in the wind, but I mean, if it's really windy, that does impact pretty much everything. So, who knows what kind of game it'll be, but I think it does level the playing field, yes.
Well, let's talk about the ground game for the Bills in case it is going to level the playing field and in case Buffalo is going to have to rely on their running backs. Yeah. Good thing that since week 10, this team has been number 1 in carries per game as well as rushing yards per game in terms of the numbers that they've averaged, about 35 carries a game since week 10 and over 150 rushing yards a game since week 10. Why can the Bills rely on the ground game at this point in the season to carry this team to a victory?
Manny, I think that's a little bit of a catch-22, and I'm just being honest because I think and Josh Allen is a meaningful part of that, and you could see him be a really meaningful part of the run game if the weather is as apparently predicted. But they've clearly committed more to the run game generally. It'll be interesting to see. I would assume Fournette would be up again. I mean, does that seem like the case, guys, that it would be Fournette who's up again with James Cook?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Fournette over Murray. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it could be a game where, because Fournette is obviously past the point in his career where he's truly an explosive back, but he is a grinder. And in that kind of weather, because he takes those short, choppy steps, his running style could be more effective on a slow surface or a slippery surface. So, I think that could be a factor for sure if need be. James Cook obviously is a little different kind of runner. He's more of the back who's shifty, elusive. Sometimes those kinds of backs in weather like that aren't quite as effective. So we'll see. I mean, it's funny. I remember watching Leonard Fournette at LSU, and his next to last year at LSU, and obviously I was wrong on him, but I thought he was so good, and I thought he'd be, such a good pro, and it's turned out, obviously not to be the case, but he was so much fun to watch in college. But I think if the game plays out like this, you could see a guy like Fournette. It's not as if he's going to rush 25 times for 130 yards, but I think, you end up in games like that, if it's truly what you're saying, a 4-yard gain is a really important play.
Yeah, it is. No question about it. Looking at the Steelers' backs, they're two very different kinds of backs, Greg. The Najee Harris between the tackles, pound out yards, and Warren's got far more explosiveness. The Bills got a dose of that back in the preseason when they went to Pittsburgh, and Warren ripped off a 62-yard run on an off-tackle play and went right down the sideline, 62 yards for a touchdown. So they know all too well what he's capable of. How much more dangerous is he if the conditions are a little compromised in terms of footing and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that, he's built a little more low to the ground. So maybe, and I don't know the answer to this, but maybe it might not affect him as much as some other backs because of the way he's built with a really low center of gravity. But you're right, Brownie. He's the explosive back in the 1-2 punch. Najee Harris, he's really been the foundation these last 3 games. He's carried the ball a lot. I mean, I think probably about 70 times in the last 3 games, give or take, I believe, since Mason Rudolph has been the quarterback. I think I'm close in that number. So that's what they want to do, and certainly the weather would dictate that they would continue to do that. And the reason they want to do that as well is because Mason Rudolph is not really a drop back quarterback. I mean, he needs the run game to be effective. They need some play action to work. Mason Rudolph can push it down the field, no question. Speaking of, do you guys have any sense of Rasul Douglas at this point?
I think he's a giant question mark right now.
Okay, so I mean, they weather permitting, I think they would take their shots down the field because Mason Rudolph can throw the deep ball, and I think they might feel that they have an opportunity to make some plays. Certainly, we know George Pickens is a really, really gifted wide receiver who can make contested catches as well as run by people. But for the most part, they're going to try to run the ball. That's the way they played. That's the way they have to play.
Yeah, George Pickens and Najee Harris have averaged 100 receiving yards for Pickens and 100 rushing yards for Harris over the last 3 games. When you look at the Steelers' defense, they'll be without T.J. Watt, a huge blow for the Steelers. How does their defense change without Watt in the lineup?
I think, Maddie, conceptually it won't change. They'll just have a player who's not quite as good. Now, I really liked Nate Herbig coming out of Wisconsin, and he had a big sack. Was it this past week or the week prior, I believe, against Seattle? He's a really good pass rusher. You know, he's quick, he's explosive. Obviously, he's not T.J. Watt, who's clearly one of the best in the league and has been for a long time. But I don't think it'll change necessarily how they play. They'll just have someone who's not quite as good, who you may not have to specifically account for, and that assuming you can play somewhat normal football, that may be the biggest issue and the biggest positive for the Bills, in that they don't have to specifically account for Herbig, where they would have had in certain down and distance situations, field location situations, specifically account for Watt.
Yeah, and we look at, red zone's probably going to be a big part of this game because going into last week's game, Bills were first in the league in red zone touchdown efficiency. They go 2 for 5 against the Dolphins. They slide all the way to 6th at the end of the season. But Pittsburgh, I think they lead the league in takeaways in the red zone. I think they have like 7 or 8 on the season, which is a fat number red zone defense-wise. What do you think has made Pittsburgh so effective down there, especially knowing that Minkah Fitzpatrick has been in and out of the lineup?
Yeah. I'm being honest, Brownie. I don't know the answer to that, and I'm just being honest. I don't want to make something up. Sometimes certain stats, can be a function of just the way it works out in a given year. It's like turnovers. People, think, well, they had 35 turnovers last year. They're going to get 35 again. Like I said, I just don't know the answer to that. Obviously they can rush the quarterback really well. When Watt's there, they have Watt and Highsmith. The other rookie who's also from Wisconsin, Benton, has been a really good player for them inside. So he's another player to watch. But, I don't have a specific answer as to why they've been really good in the red zone this year.
Flipping back to the Steelers offense, Mason Rudolph has been their quarterback for the last 3 games, at least in terms of being a starter. The Steelers have won their last 3 games. What have they gotten in Mason Rudolph? Is he having success because of the opponents he's been going up against, or do you think they have something in the offense that they've been able to put together with him at the helm, completing over 70% of his passes in the last 3 games?
Yeah, I would say, Maddie, that the key thing for their offense has been their ability to sustain offense running the football. That's the foundation. When they've not been able to do that, and quite frankly, until these last 3 games, Najee Harris was really a week-to-week proposition. They could not count on a running game. In fact, many, including myself, thought that Jaylen Warren was a better back than Najee Harris. Now, they're different, but I'm talking about just in terms of production and what he brought from a traits perspective. I thought Warren, would give you more than Harris. Now, the last 3 weeks, Harris has clearly been the foundation. They've given him the ball, as I said, about 70 times. I think he's got maybe in that stretch, 300 plus yards, I think, somewhere in that range. So that's really been the focus of their offense. And in fact, Warren has carried a little less than I would have thought. It's been Harris. So Rudolph works off that. Rudolph, they can't get into a drop back passing game with Rudolph. They need to be able to run. They need the game to be close or to be ahead, and therefore sort of manage Rudolph. Take some shots at times. Um, you know, have the defense have to react to the run by how they align. So maybe it creates a one-on-one here and there. But Rudolph is not going to be the reason that they win. Let's put it. I mean, when I say that, sure, could he hit some plays? Of course he could, but they're not going to go into this game, Pittsburgh, that is, with the idea that we only win if Mason Rudolph plays well. That's not going to be how they approach this game.
Yeah, he's the complementary piece, not the focal point. Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
Looking at the Bills defensively, if for some reason Tyrel Dodson cannot go, he's a question mark too coming into this game with a shoulder injury. I'm curious for your thoughts on Baylon Spector, Greg, because his strength is considered run defense. So if Dodson can't go, he is the odds-on favorite to replace him again this week.
And I thought, Brownie, he flashed in the run game last week. I don't know what you thought. I thought he showed up in the
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I noticed him immediately on tape, and I remember doing him coming out of Clemson and, basically thought that's what he was, thought that, he would never be truly an NFL starter, but that he could play in the league. And I think that's what we're seeing. He definitely flashed in the run game last week. If that's the way, well, this game will be that way regardless of the weather as far as Pittsburgh.
Right.
They're going to run the ball. So if he has to go and it becomes just a run game for the most part, I think, he can handle that part quite well, I believe.
Greg, as this team heads into the playoffs, into the wild card round this weekend with the game against the Steelers, they've won their last 5 games. The Buffalo Bills have. What has been the difference with how this team has been able to turn things around collectively since Week 14?
Well, I know both you guys knew that when they were 6-6 that they'd win their last 5 and get in the playoffs, right? You guys knew that.
Hey, I crossed my fingers and toes, Greg.
Right. Maddie, I think there's probably a lot of different answers to that question. I think, and it's often overlooked because of Josh Allen, but I think the defense has been really, really good. And again, I'm not there, so, I don't know how they're coaching it, how they're going about it. You have to say Sean McDermott and staff have done an unbelievable job with all the injuries. I mean, Von Miller is essentially not a major part of what they do, although he did play down the stretch last week where they brought Rousseau inside again, which is something they've done, and I kind of like Rousseau inside. But, they've done an unbelievable job given who they've had to put out there. You just talk about Spector having to play meaningful snaps. We know what their situation has been at corner. Douglas has been a godsend, but he may not be able to go. Even on the D-line, guys have been in and out of the lineup. That Daquan Jones is back now, but he missed a meaningful part of the year. So, to be able to put this all together, still have an excellent pass rush with your down 4 without having to blitz a lot. And, this team plays a lot of split safety coverage. And now it's not always cover 2. They do play cover 2. It's variations of quarters, which is, something that's a lot of teams do, but they've done it really, really well. I think playing dime on third down has really helped them. Brownie, I think you would agree with that. Getting Taylor Rapp in as your dime safety has really helped and made them a better third down defense. So I think there's a lot of factors, Maddie. It's not just you can't point your finger at one, but this defense to me, because, offensively, they're still not scoring the way we would have expected them to score. And to me, that would be the concerning thing, even if the weather was okay, because the last thing you want when you play Pittsburgh is the game to be 17-13 in the fourth quarter. We spoke about this before they played the Chargers, and they ended up winning that game. But, Brownie, remember we talked about that imagine if, that game's close in the fourth quarter. You know how that stuff works. Anybody can win those games.
Right. I wanted to ask you, because the Steelers have been victimized time and again by tight ends. They have trouble defending them for whatever reason. It would seem that the soft underbelly of the Steelers defense is similar to that of the Dolphins, the linebacker level in the passing game. That says to me Kincaid, Shakir again, and both of those guys were very effective last week against Miami. As you know, I think they had like 14 catches for 189 yards between the two of them last week. But they also used Diggs in the slot a great deal last week to kind of take advantage of that underneath area against linebackers. if you have weather rolled in as well, would it behoove the Bills to continue to use Diggs inside for more high percentage throws to get the ball to him as opposed to outside on a windy day?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just those quick throws. I mean, the bottom line is, if the weather is what you say it could well be, you want to get Josh in kind of a rhythmic throwing where he's throwing 5-yard balls. Those plays matter when the weather is bad. Keep Diggs inside. I love Shakir. We talked about him when they drafted him, and I told you I really liked him coming out of Boise. Kincaid, we know how good he can be. Yeah, I would do the same thing. Make the throws easier for Josh Allen. Let him try to play with some kind of rhythm in bad weather. Because this is not one of those games, as great as Josh is, and we know what we saw last week. Obviously many are saying it's the Josh Allen experience, good and bad. But a lot of people are losing sight of the fact that he was 14 for 15 for 141 in the second half. And a lot of those throws were just rhythm throws, quick game throws, drop back, plant his back foot, throw a 6-yard ball. Those plays don't appear on highlights, but as you guys know, those are really important plays in games. Obviously, he made some special plays with his legs as well, as he's always wanted to do and is more than capable of doing. But no, I agree. I think you put Diggs inside. You're going to need to sustain offense. The last thing you want to do in a game like this is feel like you're going 3 and out and punting all the time.
Yeah, Greg, you talked about the Chargers game and the game being close for the Bills. Well, leading up until that game and really after the bye week, the Bills started to win games like we said, but all their losses have been by 6 or less points.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the season, they were losing those close games. They found a way to win those close games toward the end of the regular season here. I know you talked about the defense being a difference maker in the last 5 weeks, but when it comes to closing out games, winning those close games, the defense has been on the field at times to close out a game, but then the offense has as well. Can you point to something as to why the Bills have been able to win those close games in the last 4 weeks here?
I don't know if, those are hard questions too, as to why you win those, you lose those. I mean, look, as you know, Matty, there were games earlier in the season where the offense got them the lead with 2 minutes or less to go, and at that point the defense didn't hold. I mean, imagine if the defense held, and I know you could say if about with a lot of teams, but you might be talking about a team that would won 13 or 14 games. So you never know exactly why that is. The one thing we do know is, and again, weather permitting, you get in the fourth quarter of games, and Josh Allen, he may throw some bad balls. He may, make some plays that some consider reckless earlier in games, but you normally get into fourth quarters and he shines. I mean, he makes throws, he makes runs. He's very difficult to defend. And we see that kind of week after week. So like even in those games that they lost in the fourth quarter, he still did a really good job offensively, putting them in position to win. So I think, in some ways, having Josh Allen, and my guess is the team knows that he can do that, and they feel pretty confident that if they get in the fourth quarter and they need a drive, that Josh Allen is going to make the drive.
Last one for you, Greg, concerning the rest of the playoff slate this weekend. Just knowing offensive and defensive schemes of these respective teams as you do, which one looks to be a bad matchup for one of these teams? Like the team they have to face is not a good draw for them based on what they do offensively or defensively.
Oh boy. I'm looking, at the slate right now. Believe it or not, the way that the Eagles are playing, particularly offensively, I think the Buccaneers with their pressure concepts would pose a problem. Now, the Eagles still have a lot of talent, so I qualify that to some degree because they have talented players. But the way they've played of late, they've really struggled handling pressure. Hurts has not seen things as cleanly as he needs to. He's been a little quick to get out of the pocket and disrupt the timing of plays, and Todd Bowles, as you guys know, I don't remember the last time you played Tampa, but as you know, Todd Bowles, he's going to blitz off the bus, so he's going to come after them. He's going to make them have to deal with that. And again, all we have is what's happened prior. We don't know what's going to happen this weekend, but based on what's happened prior, the Eagles have not handled that well at all.
That could be a tougher game for
Yeah,
them than
yeah.
maybe some people realize. Yeah, we remember Todd Bowles from his Jets days. Blitzing coming off the bus is right. No question about it.
No question.
Greg,
and he's good at it. A lot of different concepts.
Yeah. Greg, thanks for the time. As always, enjoy the games this weekend. We'll catch up with you next week.
Looking forward to it, guys. Have fun. Thank you.